Welcome to Cultivate, a Veritas Academy podcast, where we explore truth, beauty, and goodness through meaningful conversation. We invite you to join us in discussions meant to edify your mind, encourage your heart, and equip your family to live abundantly in Christ.
Welcome back to Cultivate, folks. I'm Ty Fischer. I'm the head of school here at Veritas and the host of the Cultivate podcast. And I have three guests with me today. I have Miss Caroline Nixon, who is our senior thesis teacher. And I have two seniors who just defended their thesis. And these two seniors, one of them you know a little bit, one of them you might not know at all, but I'm going to introduce them to you now. They are the valedictorian and salutatorian of our senior class this year. Congratulations. So I'm going to introduce you to one of the students that you might not know her name, but you've heard her before, and that's Meg Coughlan. She's our salutatorian this year, and she is also the voice that you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast. So, Meg, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You sound the same every time. I mean, how do you hit the same words every time?
Well, I do believe it is the same recording that's played every time.
Well, I'm not good with technology, honestly. We are going to have a podcast about that during this season. And the other guest is John Spead. He is our valedictorian this year. John, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me onto this.
Yeah. Okay. So my first question is going to be for our teacher, Caroline Nixon. So what is senior thesis?
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Fischer.
Thank you for being here.
Answering that question is a little bit complicated, but what the senior thesis has been for the last couple of years is a chance for the senior class, for each individual student to pick a topic that they're interested in or a question that they're interested in researching. And then they research the question and formulate their opinion about it, verify their opinion against their research, and also explore opinions that oppose their research, and then write all of that together into a substantive paper, which they edit and edit and edit several times, and then they get to present to panelists and in front of the entire upper school and most of the faculty, and then defend it from questions from the panelists.
Sounds pretty rigorous and pretty scary.
I think there definitely are some nerves that go along with the course. And with
It's the sweatiest course at Veritas Academy, I think.
Even sweatier than gym class? I don't know.
Probably.
We might rival gym class.
Okay.
But I think we've talked throughout the year about the nerves that come with this course and the triumph that comes from this course. And we've gotten to that part of the year, which is really exciting.
Okay, yeah. This podcast would be very different were it recorded like 3 or 4 months ago. Is that right?
I agree. It would be a lot different, a lot more nerves.
Yeah. So let's John, from a student's perspective, let's go with John and Meg on this one. From a student's perspective, just describe the class to me.
Yeah, so from a student's perspective, the class has been very beneficial in how I've learned to write as a whole, and my process of writing, and how I think through writing, and in how I execute my writing. Really from start to finish, it's been very enlightening. It's been very difficult compared to other writing courses at Veritas, but I think that it's prepared me well for college.
Okay. Meg, what do you think?
Well, I'm someone who quite likes to write, and I am not known for my brevity. So this course has definitely helped me to narrow down large topics, which I'm interested in, into a size that's actually manageable for a paper or project. When I first started working on my paper, my first draft was 60 pages.
Oh, Meg.
Yeah. For a 20 to 22 page maximum paper.
Yeah.
It was a bit much, but I learned how to edit and to destroy pieces that I've quite liked writing, but that simply aren't relevant.
Yeah, I once had a student that it was a wonderful paper. She was writing about stem cells, I think, adult stem cells versus fetal stem cell use. But really what she wanted to do was to write a compendium of Eastern and Western medicine. And she kept doing that, and I kept crossing out pages of her paper. And she didn't like me very much. So Miss Nixon, could you give us an overview of the parts of the senior thesis class. So what that process looks like, just in a broad overview. We don't want to get down into the weeds. We don't have time to get down into the weeds. But what is it? So they're looking for a topic, then talk about each step along the way, or each major step along the way.
Sure. So the students begin by just brainstorming topics that they're interested in or questions that they have. And oftentimes I encourage them to pursue questions that they have. I think that ends up making the research process a lot more fun. And then once they've brainstormed topics, they get to start doing research. They find what sources they can access, and that can kind of shape which topic they end up picking, which resources they can find. And after they've gathered a bunch of resources, they hone their topic a little bit more and then actually dig into the research.
Okay.
And so, the class spent about a month doing intensive research. They had to have a minimum of 15 sources and a certain number of
Meg might have had
scholarly
like
sources.
80 sources or something like that. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
And then once they've done about 85% of the research is when they get to start writing. Mm-hmm. So I have them start by writing a short essay arguing the opposite opinion, because we use the Socratic method.
So you want to make sure that the students understand the opposite point of view effectively. And that's kind of part of writing in the classical format, is not just to say what you believe, but to show that you actually understand what a reasonable person who disagrees with you would be saying.
Exactly. And so that's the goal of having the students write a short paper arguing the opposite perspective. Mm-hmm. And then once they've done that, they do a little bit, deeper engagement with their own perspective, responding to that. And then they write. And the first draft, we just focus on getting the content out of your brain and onto the computer, onto the paper. And then they edit, starting with paper level edits and then working down through paragraph level edits down to sentence and word level edits.
Okay. Well, let's go to the students. We'll start with John. What was your topic and why did you choose it?
Yeah, so my topic was on the permissibility of fantasy magic within Christian use. I chose it because I've been interested in Dungeons and Dragons for a while, getting into that genre, which I know it's a little bit scary to have your valedictorian getting interested in Dungeons and Dragons at a classical Christian school.
You're not going to disappear during the graduation ceremony, are you?
No, certainly not. I will not be disappearing anytime in the future unless Jesus comes back again.
Okay.
But that was really the question that prompted me to think through, because I wanted to think through kind of the theology and the different biblical evidences, either for or against Dungeons and Dragons. So I came into the thesis class with a question more so than a perspective that I wanted to research and argue.
Okay. Now, Meg, what was your paper about, and why did you choose that topic?
So my paper was on the juxtaposition of courtly and Christian love in 19th century European literature, specifically Pride and Prejudice and War and Peace.
Pride and Prejudice and War and Peace. Did you choose them because they're kind of like Pride and Prejudice, War and Peace? Is that the...
Well, my original idea was also to include Romeo and Juliet. So you get, like, the triple.
Yeah, it's kind
parallels.
of Trinitarian or something like that. So what's the hardest part? Where do you see, Caroline, students struggling the most in this class?
I think probably the two hardest parts are choosing a topic that's well suited to the project.
Well, how do they overshoot or undershoot, or what kind of topic actually works well in a senior thesis class?
So the topic has to be small enough to be manageable within a 15 to 20 page paper. So I've had several students who have started off with broader topics, and then as they've started their research, we've worked together to make them narrower and make them narrower.
Sure.
To make them manageable.
Is that because students don't believe they can write 20 pages? They think they have to have a topic that's huge in order to get that much out of it.
I think it's probably more related to the fact that the students are asking big questions. They want to know about big topics that are complex, and so they're excited to research things. And sometimes I have to say, pick this particular part of this topic that you want to research to make that more manageable.
So, Meg, what was the most important thing you feel like you learned from this process?
Well, for me, I would have to say there were two main things that I'm probably going to walk away from this course having. And one is being able to, like I said earlier, cut down my papers to actually be a proper length instead of going way, way over the page.
We call that Hemingwaying the paper, right? Because Hemingway just chopped everything out. Very straightforward.
And the second thing is how to really organize the structure of a paper for research and things like that. I tend to, when I write, just start with the introduction and go all the way through, writing however it feels right. But this year I really learned how to properly structure a paper and work off of that.
Yeah, 'cause sometimes as you get to the end of your evidence and you're taking the other side into account, you might have a different direction. You want to go with some other parts of the paper, like the introduction and the conclusion. So what do you think was the hardest thing for you, killing some of those pages, killing 2/3 of the pages that you loved?
Yes, probably. I have a file folder on my laptop of all of the pieces that I had to cut from the paper saved and ready for if I ever decide to come back to them in the future.
Yeah, maybe you can sprinkle them in the dirt and they'll grow up to be a nice garden of papers. Mm-hmm. So, John, what do you think you learned? What was the most important thing you learned? And then what was the hardest thing about this class?
Yeah, for me, the most important thing I would say was the whole entire process, learning how to take an idea in your mind that you really just don't have any clue how it's going to be fleshed out, and turning that into a paper of some length, whether it's a 20 to 22 page paper. I think I was right on the edge of 22 pages, and then, or much shorter as like a 3-page paper. The entire process of how to effectively do that, I think, was the most important thing that I learned, even more important than actually researching my topic, because I think it'll benefit me well in the future.
Mm-hmm. Could both of you tell us, just give us a very short summary of what were your findings? What thesis did you defend?
Yeah, for me, I defended the thesis that it is permissible for Christians to interact and play with fantasy magic in a fantastical frame of reality.
Oh, John. Oh, my. I think he's been possessed, I think, don't you? Is this can we have a intervention? Is this this podcast an intervention? Yeah, I don't know. I never did get into Dungeons and Dragons, but what you're talking about really impacts things like Harry Potter, reading Harry Potter, and kind of being in an imaginative world like that. And then, unfortunately for some Christians, also includes things like The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, sure. It includes not just fantasy, like playing fantasy, like role-playing games, but it also includes things like books, movies, even potentially artwork to an extent. Anywhere that's a creative outlet that it would include those types of things.
Okay, so you were defending the pro-dungeons.
You could call it that.
And pro-dragons. So, and Meg, what about you?
My thesis was that in the works of Pride and Prejudice and War and Peace, the way the authors skillfully portray courtly or Christian love impacts the relationships of the characters, with relationships being rooted in Christian love ending happily or as a satisfying relationship to the reader, and those rooted in courtly love and in death or misery and are unsatisfying to the reader.
Okay. And Elizabeth Bennett does make some appearances in your paper, which she's one of my favorite characters in all of literature. So good job picking her.
Thank you.
So, Miss Nixon, tell us, one of the most interesting or exciting parts of the senior thesis process is the presentation. How do you train students to get ready to stand in front of parents, the rest of the secondary school, and then to answer questions from people who are oftentimes experts in the field?
Well, I think the first and probably most important thing that gets them ready for that is the research and the work they do in finishing their paper before they present their speech. So by the time they're really looking presentation day in the eye, when they're getting close to that, they are very confident in the information that they've researched because they've spent a lot of time with it by then. Mm-hmm. But addressing specifically getting ready for questions from panelists, we practice asking questions. We assign students to listen to each other's speeches and ask panelists questions and, pretend to be, somebody who has a doctorate in a field and takes an opposite position. I ask them,
who are the best doctrinal pretenders in the senior class?
We've got a pretty good crew. Yeah. I feel like we could have several PhDs in our class.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Fake PhDs, that is.
And then we have a flow sheet for how to answer questions that the students, can think through and use as they're practicing thinking through questions.
Now, Miss Nixon, you are, and I'm not sure exactly how to say this. You're in the midst of, or have you completed your master's thesis at this point?
I turned in my final assignment a week ago yesterday, and I graduate on the same day as this senior class.
Oh,
so we're all graduating together.
That's wonderful. Are you going to have to do a defense?
I do not have to do a defense.
Now, isn't that so? Are you happy about that or sad about it?
I mean, it's definitely less stressful to not have to do a defense, but the parallels of being in my own capstone writing course while I'm teaching a capstone writing course have been really fun, and I think it would be a bit fun to have a defense, parallel to what my students are doing. So I did get to present my paper in front of my class, but it was much less, it was much more low key than what the seniors here have done.
Maybe next year in senior thesis, we could have you making a defense.
Yeah.
Oh,
that'd be cool.
I think that could be good. The students are nodding. Our seniors at Veritas sometimes are uncomfortable with the level of work and the intensity of the presentation for senior thesis. But once they've completed it, there's the great sigh of relief. And then they really look forward to coming back and being panelists when they become experts so they can torture other students.
Actually, Mr. Fischer, when we finish our thesis, we look forward to the Thai restaurant. That's what we look forward to.
Yeah. So one of our traditions at Veritas, and we are a tradition-affirming school. That's one of our core values. And one of those traditions is that after senior thesis, we all go out, all of the seniors, a couple of teachers, Miss Nixon, of course, and a few administrators. We go out and we try new food. And we went to a Thai restaurant this year, not Thai like Thai Fischer, not my restaurant. This is like a THAI restaurant, where some of us thought we had hot food. But what we discovered the next day at Buffalo Wild Wings with the Carolina Reaper wings is that we had not tasted hot food yet. Is that correct, John?
That would be pretty accurate.
Yeah. So, Meg, for you, and I was in the room. I wasn't one of your panelists, but I was running the video in your room. So, what was the most challenging part of that presentation and especially the questioning? What was the most challenging part of that for you?
Well, I would say one of the most challenging parts was that I was wearing a dress for my presentation, and I was not aware we were going to be having lapel mics, so I had nowhere to put the mic pack. So I sort of had to tuck it inside my binder and hold on to it while we were doing questions to make sure it wouldn't fall out. So that was a very stressful and challenging part of the presentation.
So that's not a wardrobe malfunction. That's just a wardrobe that has not the function that you need.
Exactly.
So,
but in all seriousness, answering panelist questions, it was a lot of fun, but you have to be on your toes the entire time just to be prepared to answer whatever they throw at you.
Because it's not like they always agree with you. Yeah. I remember one saying that she said, "I dispute this in your paper," or something like that.
Yes, and afterwards, I came up with a response to her critique, but unfortunately, it was the next night, so I...
So you want to have a rematch?
I would love to have further discussion on my topic.
Well, and John, I wasn't able to be in your room, but we're going to ask you the same question next. But Meg, I could really tell, it made me very proud, honestly, that I could see that you delighted not just in the topic, but in interacting with other people who delighted in that topic. And you had some, with Mr. Dennis and Dr. Draper, and who was the other doctor?
Dr. Kent.
Dr. Kent. That was just a wonderful panel. So, John, how did your presentation go, and what was maybe the most challenging part of it?
My presentation went pretty well. I'm very satisfied with how it went, and
You don't want a rematch?
I praise God. No, I would like further discussion though, and to that point, I got some additional sources from one of my panelists, Dr. Jeffrey Ryder, and so I'm going to be reading those sources this summer, hopefully, if time allows. But for the most difficult part, I just got my grade back, so I don't feel bad saying this. It's not going to affect my grade or anything. But there were a couple.
You think the podcast would affect your grade, John?
I don't know. My teacher is in the room.
That's
so.
true. That's true. But she's not a vengeful. Or maybe I don't know.
There were a couple of times where I could have definitely been a little bit less nervous and had a little bit better eye contact. And I think it would have helped if I practiced my speech more than 2 times going into it for that to happen.
That's possibly true. That's possibly true, John. So, Meg and John, and of course Miss Nixon, you all put in a lot of work this year to get ready for this. It's a challenging thing to do. It's in many ways. I have a master's degree as well. I never was on the spot in exactly the same way. Now, there were times when I would be questioned by a teacher, but usually not publicly. I think unless you, like, this reminded me of like a ordination exam or something like that. But was it worth it? What do you think you're going to take from this class that you're hoping to take with you that will be valuable to you in the future?
Well, I am going to college for literature and history, so definitely the writing skills I've developed over this course will be very useful.
And you're going to?
Washington and Lee University.
Yeah, down is that in Lexington?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful area, beautiful campus. And let's get John. John, what do you hope to take with you that's going to be valuable out of this course?
Well, senior thesis is technically a composition, like an English 101 course if you're taking the college credit, but
so you got college credit for this class?
Yes, hopefully it transfers over well. I think it will. But what I think it actually is, it's more of a communications class, right?
Okay.
You're learning to communicate your thoughts effectively, both on paper and in front of an audience with both a rehearsed speech, but then having to think on your feet as well. So I think it covers 3 major aspects of communication, which are going to be important in college, but then also should help and benefit each one of us as we go through life, whether it's in the workplace or at home.
Yeah, and John, what are you majoring in? What college are you headed to?
Yeah, I'm headed to Liberty University. I'm going to be in the honors college, majoring in computer engineering, hopefully with a minor in entrepreneurship.
Now, I've been around. I've been around a lot of people that are liberal arts people, but I've also been around some people that have been involved in technology and the computer world and stuff like that. Let me just say, John, I think that you going through this process and being able to write and being able to speak under pressure like this, I don't know that there are going to be too many computer engineers that are like that.
Right, and I see that as a huge advantage coming out of high school with this opportunity to carry me forward into the future. Engineers are generally known for not being able to know how to spell, let alone communicate. I fully plan on getting a sign for my dorm room that says, "I'm an engineer."
Engineer? Yeah, there's no spell check on sign making.
No.
So, Miss Nixon, final question here. What do you want to see these students carry with them? That you've been a number of steps further. I mean, you have your bachelor's degree and now almost your master's degree. But what do you want to see the students like at the end of this course?
I think there are probably 2 things that I want the students to take away from this course. And they're both related to the idea of rhetoric and what rhetoric is. So the first is that I want the students to be able to communicate well. Mm-hmm. And I think John representing the class as a communications course is one of the most important things about the senior thesis. Mm-hmm. Because if a person has wonderful ideas but is not able to communicate them to others in a way that is convincing and winsome and makes those ideas look desirable, those ideas aren't going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I want the students to be able to communicate their ideas well. And then the second is also related to the goals of rhetoric, and that would be to wisely understand what is going on around them and then be able to interpret that well and respond to that well.
Well, and it's that exercise of really figuring out what a reasonable person who disagreed with you is thinking. That's a skill that so often in today's culture is just lacking everywhere. Everyone kind of gets into their own little huddle, and they don't take into account the fact that reasonable people could disagree with them. So I think students, I would really encourage you just to hold on to that idea. Usually there's a reason why someone thoughtful disagrees with you. So that's a powerful point. So John and Meg and Caroline, thank you for being here today on the podcast, and God bless you all in your upcoming graduations. And thank you for sharing this time with us.
You've been listening to Cultivate, the podcast of Veritas Academy, a preschool through 12th grade classical Christian school in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to learn more about Veritas, visit veritasacademy.com to discover the truth, beauty, and goodness of classical Christian education.